time to take your coding break. Howdy Coding Pros, this is your medical coding coach, Tam, talk about all things medical coding related, which will include the good, the bad, and perhaps some ugly things as it relates to the medical coding industry. But on today's episode, I want to check in and see how are you doing? Really, how are you doing with the ICD-10 2026 codes? How are you doing? ICD-10 codes, that is, I stand corrected. The ICD-10 2026 codes. Well, I won't wait around for an answer, but I want to touch on a couple, perhaps 3 of the significant guideline changes as it relates to our 2026 ICD-10 Coding Guidelines. So I'm going to focus first on the HIV coding. HIV Coding Guideline changes for 2026 states that the revised guidelines clarify the sequencing of codes for HIV disease, and that code is B20, versus asymptomatic status, which is Z21. Again, B20 is for HIV disease, and Z21 is for asymptomatic status. The 2026 Coding Guideline states that coders must now assign B20 if the provider documents AIDS, HIV disease, or any condition resulting from the patient's positive status. And I'll repeat that. Coders must now assign B20 if the provider documents AIDS, HIV disease, or any condition resulting from the patient's positive status. Specific instructions are also provided for testing encounters, treatment, and pregnancy. So again, this is significant change for HIV coding. Our next one is type 2 diabetes. Again, type 2 diabetes that is in remission. There is a new code for type 2 diabetes in remission, and that new code is E11.A, the letter A. Again, that is E11.A. And this code was introduced for documenting type 2 diabetes in remission. A corresponding guideline advises that this code can be assigned only when the provider specifically documents remission and not for vague terms like resolve. Again, the provider must specifically document that the type 2 diabetes is in remission. If it is resolved, I would recommend a query, or we're not going to be using the type 2 code the type 2 in remission codes, which is E11.A. Our next one is multiple sites coding. Multiple sites coding. Again, the guideline now define multiple sites as involving 2 or more anatomical locations. 2 or more anatomical locations is now the new guideline or definition for multiple sites. Coders should follow any chapter-specific instructions for conditions affecting multiple sites. If a condition affects multiple unspecified sites, and multiple sites code should be assigned. Now, this one I may do an actual ICD-10 coding breakdown video on YouTube for this one. But again, it states that if multiple sites are involved, and again, it's 2 or more, it must be documented that it's 2 or more anatomical locations, the coder should follow any chapter-specific instructions for conditions affecting multiple sites. If the condition affects multiple unspecified sites, and multiple sites code should be assigned. Okay, so my last one I'm going to touch on for this episode is BMI, Body Mass Index. BMI code should only be assigned when the patient has a related reportable diagnosis such as obesity or anorexia. So for encounters with fluctuating BMI values, the code for the most severe value should be assigned. And I'll repeat that. The BMI codes should only be assigned when the patient has a related, reportable diagnosis, such as obesity or anorexia. For encounters with fluctuating BMI values, like it may be up one day and it may be down the next, the code for the most severe value should be assigned. So we're going to go with the most severe value. That could be obesity, morbid obesity, or it could be anorexia. Whichever is the most severe, that should be the one assigned. So there's a lot more changes as it relates to the ICD-10 Coding Guidelines, but these are the first three that I reviewed and I wanted to bring to your attention. So again, it has to do with HIV coding, type 2 diabetes in remission, and again, I specify in remission, and then multiple sites coding. And as I also mentioned, I may do a quick PowerPoint YouTube video on multiple sites just to show the drill down of that particular guideline, because it's stating again that the guidelines now define multiple sites as involving 2 or more anatomical locations. So what does this mean? That the provider is going to have to be very specific in their documentation. They can't be vague in their documentation. They have to be very specific, like which anatomical locations are we referencing. Again, the coder should follow any chapter-specific instructions for the conditions affecting multiple sites. Again, and the only time a coder will be looking at this information is based upon the documentation of the provider. So if the provider does not document this appropriately, then I don't know what that process will be for the coders. Again, that process is different for every organization. I would say I would query the provider if it warrants that, or you're going to code based on what's in front of you, right? Again, this will require the documentation by the providers to be more specific as it relates to technically all of them, but definitely like the type 2 diabetes in remission. So if the doctor states that the diabetes is resolved, that doesn't warrant using the E11.A, which is the type 2 diabetes mellitus in remission. Again, this is specific to type 2, not type 1, but type 2 diabetes in remission. And the term remission must be documented. So yes. So again, look for a YouTube video on the ICD-10 drop down for the multiple sites, because I would really want to delve into that a little bit more and show you all how that code should be assigned, or how you should go about assigning those codes for this particular guideline change. So that's all that I have for this coding break. But as always, remember to code on, review your guidelines, ask questions, query, and like I say, code on. Until next time, toodles.